I'm a learning coach and I've spent years investigating how we learn, retain, and master things. And here's what I've been seeing with AI. AI and vibe coding enables something we call project-based learning through unstructured learning. Instead of being taught a curriculum like you would in high school, college, a course, or university, you lead your own learning with what you want to build. You decide the path. But the big problem, though, is something that no one's talking about, is one of the biggest determinants of how effectively you learn and produce things is something that we call cognitive load. Your brain has to be working hard. It's like going to the gym. No resistance, no growth. And a majority of vibe coding and AI building, it produces very little cognitive load, zero effort. Most people are just watching the AI think for them. And that's why for a very long time, AI was making me feel dumber. So I did my research and I came up with 5 principles to fix this. And the cool part is I've just been brought in by an organization to build their evaluation pipeline for their entire instructor and education team. They picked me over people with more technical expertise, mainly because of how I use AI to produce high order thinking and decision making that they can trust. That's what these 5 principles build. And I'm doing a project live today on camera using all 5. So let's go. Starting off with the first principle, which is what we call non-linearity. Before I touch AI or I open a single piece of content, I just map out how the existing version of me would solve this. I don't do any research yet, no prompting. What I do is I just brain dump what I know, what do I think this needs, and what my assumptions are. This is non-linear. I do this on a whiteboard. It's messy, and this is the baseline. So let's open up our app here. So this is our app of choice, which is Miro, and you can use an iPad and you can use paper, whatever you want to use. And we're going to bring out a trusty old timer, and this is exactly what we'll do. So what I'll do is I'm going to set a timer for, I would say probably going to be around 10 minutes here. And again, you can decide how much time you want to spend on this. The more time, the better, usually. And in this 10 minutes, I'm just going to do a brain dump of a list of keywords that I feel like I've learned so far that is relevant to everything here so far. And basically going to map it out in terms of my understanding of what this project requires. So let's start that timer for 10 minutes here. Here we go. And I will make sure that I make reference to that. And this is what I'm practically doing. I'm just going to take a list and I'm going to start. For this project that I've been hired to do, what exactly do I need to do and what do I need to solve? So one of the first things that come to mind is obviously we're doing this for educators, and there's going to be something about evaluation, and there's something about quality assurance here as well. And I remember during a few meetings that I had with the team, so again, before this conversation, before I've actually done this whiteboard, I've already had a few conversations with the team that brought me on. They are wanting to have an external review. So this is someone else reviewing the work, but also an internal review as well, which is what I proposed. I proposed that we need to have a mechanism in place for the educators where they are taking ownership of their own growth. And we call that self-regulation in the literature. So what else is here? There's also going to be self-regulated learning that comes to mind. And there's also going to be the components of self-regulation, which is insight and judgment. So you can see I'm not bothering about opening up any document yet, and I'm not relying on AI to actually do this yet, because again, I want to take ownership of that non-linearity. I want to map things out. So let's keep going. What else was there? There was ideas about metacognition here too. There was ideas of the learning science being involved in this document here. What else? Okay. Vocal foundations, something that we talked about. I proposed using Vin Zhang's 5 vocal foundations, or there was 6 that I made reference to. There was body language, there was tonality, there was pause, there was pitch, there was volume, and there was, I always forget the last one. I'll get back to it. Yeah. Rate of speech. That's right. Okay, cool. So that's something else we talked about as well. What else did we talk about? There's a few more things. Okay. There's a few more things, and I'm sure I remember it. We talked about having examples there as well, like videos actually showing those examples there too. A few more things come to mind. but I am blanking a little bit, which is why I can now start thinking about more relationships. The reason we want to do this is because when we're building these apps, when you get into prompting too soon, you're already putting linear prompts into Claude or whatever app you're using, OpenAI or Perplexity, whatever app. I usually use Claude Cowork now. And you're being quite linear with how you're prompting it. But you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you've got this nonlinear mastery and this schema to actually work off of. So let's actually start relating it. There's something about educators doing evaluation. Oops, that color's not great. There's something about educators doing evaluation for themselves, and there's quality assurance, there's internal, external going on here as well. And there's something about self-regulated learning here too. We've got 7 minutes left. We talked about how this is important for developing their metacognition. We talked about how we can integrate learning science here. Ooh, there's a few more keywords that I thought about that just came to mind. Let me just add them here as well. There's something about classroom engagement here too. There's something about pedagogy and using pedagogical techniques like, analogy building, storytelling. There's a lot more here, like didactic, the Socratic method. There's a lot that we talked about. Okay, so I'm starting to get an understanding of how things are, but let me map this out. We've got educators, and the educators, they've got classroom recordings. There we go. And something else that they have here as well is they've got internal reviews, which is what we're starting. This is the reason I've been brought in to actually build this workflow, and those external reviews as well, which is what was already existing before I came in. So this is what I proposed: internal reviews, and basically this is that self-regulation component that we're introducing, which is what the workflow needs to integrate. And what used to happen was it was only the external reviewers that would then give feedback to the educators, but then the educators wouldn't have to do a lot of reflection themselves. So what's going to happen is the external reviewers are going to have access to both classroom recordings and the internal reviews. That then allows for calibration on 2 levels. First, the external reviewers get to review the actual classroom recording, and the second thing here is that we get to review how they're thinking about their own improvement, right? So this is that metacognitive calibration. So, for example, if an external reviewer reviews the classroom recording and they notice that the educator is not using enough analogy building, therefore there's actually a gap in their ability to engage the classroom and teach, they will give feedback on that. But if in the internal review, the educator themselves doesn't even acknowledge that they're not using metaphors or analogies, etc., that's a problem, because the educator is not even able to realize it. They don't know what they don't know. It's that unconscious incompetence that exists. So that's something else that comes to mind. Conscious competency model. Here too, conscious competence model that comes. How much time do we have? We have 4 minutes. That's all good. There's also Gibbs, Kolb's, Driscoll's, like search and reflective models that we can use. But the idea was with the internal reviews, they do a reflection and they then create experiments and changes for their next class. And this gets basically funneled into next class so they can improve. So we've got that there as well that we need to have. Reflection, experiment, there we go, and there was a next class here as well. Nice. So those are the things there. Okay. Now, yeah, that's what needs to be done. Now, there's something about what needs to be in the reflection. There needs to be 4 dimensions reflected on. And there were things like, obviously, the vocal delivery. So actually, what they taught, so this is the content. How they taught it, which is the vocal delivery. And how classroom received it, which is going to be engagement. And there was also pedagogy as well, like how pedagogy. So there's both, like how do they teach it, how do they deliver it? So there's 2 how questions, or 3 how questions, and how do the classroom actually receive it? So that's what needs to be done. Obviously, we need to finalize the questions, and then based on the reflection, that's going to lead into experiments. And this is where we might actually have an AI component. Like they might be able to click a button, and then there's like experimentation suggestions that can occur, experiment suggestions, based on the evidence that they've had. I'm thinking that there can also be AI component that provides like literal examples or video references to the experiment. So they might actually want to experiment with something, for example, like increased volume, but what does it actually look like? They may not know. So there could be an AI component that reads their experiments and actually provides them something there as well. And there's also something operational that we need to consider here. This either goes onto WhatsApp or Telegram because, you know, these people are very busy. So there's like an operational component there as well that we need to think about, and making sure that the reflection is like solid enough. Here we go. That's going to be here. We can just put that there. Nice. And then this gets funneled into the next class. And, you know, right before the next class, there could be a notification on WhatsApp or Telegram that says, hey, by the way, make sure you try this out for the next class. Okay, we've got a minute going. So again, you'd see I'd actually want to give myself a lot more time here. So those are going to be the AI components. And obviously we need to finalize those. The external reviewers, they also need to be upskilled in some way, shape or form. Like there's going to be these reflections that get sent to the external reviewers as well. So there's going to be some upskilling there in terms of like what the form includes, etc. And there needs to be like conversation around how education leads, like lead of education will actually take these forms and help educators as well. So I've got a minute left on the clock, and again, if I had more time, I'd actually spend time here. And practically what I would do is I would actually spend time with the people, with the project owners, with the educators themselves to get feedback on this flow. And you can see, before I even start playing around with AI, etc., the reason I want to do this process is because it makes me just already take the existing knowledge that I have in my brain about how I need to map things out and how I need to make sense of things. And this then allows us to move into the second principle that I use when building projects. So Q monitoring, essentially throughout that process, I just mapped things out on Miro. I'm checking one thing. How hard am I actually thinking right now? And I use a very simple scale, a 3-level scale that you can use. You can kind of use your thumbs here. Low cognitive load means that I'm not really thinking that hard. It feels a bit easy. Medium cognitive load feels like, yeah, I'm kind of in the right zone. And too much load, it feels like I'm thinking very, very hard. It means that like my brain is exploding. And the goal is we want to stay in that medium point as much as possible. So if we just go back to our form here, if we go back to the whiteboard here, the question that I want to ask myself as I do this process is, how hard is this feeling right now? And I was doing that mentally as I was doing the Principle 1 demonstration. And this part was a little bit tricky. There was some things on my mind here, and I was feeling like the load was going up a little bit more. So if we use that 3 scale, I do want to demonstrate, and I do want to tell you exactly what to do. So as you do this nonlinear process, first of all, if you have more time, definitely give yourself more time. 10 minutes is just for demonstration's sake. We've got a 3-level scale, so 3 scale. Let me just put that up. 3. And the first one is going to be low. We've got medium and high. And you can use this scale during any process in which you are learning or mapping things out. So again, we are going to be touching AI soon, but again, I do want to prioritize this process of non-linearity and mapping things out. So very simply, if your cognitive effort, if it feels low, if you're doing this mapping and it feels passive, and basically this is the reason, this is what actually people experience when they're vibe building, if they were to ask themselves this question, they're not doing a lot of thinking, right? They're kind of just like prompting, they're letting the AI do most of the building, and they're just sitting there and they're vibing, whatever. But if there's not a lot of thinking involved, you aren't taking ownership of the project, which is why projects and people and organizations hire you in the first place, so you can do the hard thinking for them as to how things need to be built out. So you can already see the reason we start off with this process here is so we can engage ourselves in these 2 zones, a little bit of a medium to higher level of cognitive effort. And this is what's valuable, because this is where you're actually thinking. This is where, if you're practically having conversations with the project owners, you are deeply trying to think about what are the variables that need to be in play, what are some assumptions that I'm making, what are some considerations that I'm not immediately thinking about, right? And it's through these 2 zones, when you're actually deeply thinking, do you ask the right questions, and do you start thinking about those breakthroughs that actually make really solid products? So for example, in this part here, when I was actually having conversations with the team and as I was mapping this out in my own time, I noticed that I was feeling that medium to high level of load, and it got me asking a few questions. It got me to ask, wait, hang on, don't we need to consider about the fact that these educators are very busy and therefore like maybe a way to put it into their lifestyle, make it a bit more simpler. And that's how the team and I thought about, well, we need to think about like a WhatsApp or a Telegram integration, which was awesome. So that's the reason why we spend time on that non-linearity to begin with. And again, if you have more time, I'd recommend spending 30 minutes here, 1 hour here. I'd recommend actually making it a part of your initial conversations with the team. If you've been brought in by an organization, the very first meeting that you have together is this non-linear process where you sit down for 90 minutes, you sit down for an hour, and you map this out together. So once you actually engage in this process, there are different solutions for which level of cognitive load as you monitor these cues. If you're experiencing too low cognitive load, what this means is you need to pause a little bit more, and we need to actually go back to searching and thinking. So practically, if I feel as if I had like low cognitive effort invested during this mapping process, or when I build AI, and we'll do that together, that means that I just need to stop. And I just need to spend time actually pausing, searching around, and trying to think about the information. If I have that medium load, this just means continue going, because this is actually that sweet zone. That's actually where you want to spend that time. If you have too much load, this means that you should offload. This means that you should actually stop and you should start mapping things out a lot more. So I'll just summarize that. If it's too low, it means your process is too passive. It means that you're vibing a bit too much. And it means that you need to pause and spend time really digesting what is going on. And something that I like a technique that you can use here is just explaining to a 10-year-old. Like, do you actually know what's going on so far? Is it too vibey? Is it too passive? You'll be able to call yourself out when you try explaining everything so far to a 10-year-old. And if you can't do that correctly, if you can't explain what's going on and the decisions that you've made and the reason why things are the way they are, then that suggests that you need to actually spend time learning about your project and mapping everything out. If you're experiencing that medium load, or it's like, this is hard, it's not too hard, but it's not too easy. That's that sweet zone that you want to spend when it comes to this hard thinking. So this just means continue what you're doing. If you're building out that project, if you're actually prompting, that means continue. That means actually going forward and, pausing every now and then, trying to build it, making sure that you're also mapping it out, and concurrently having this map out and also having your AI agent of choice out. And we'll show what that looks like. And finally, high is when you want to stop and go back to this nonlinear map. Because if you're like having a headache and you're like, oh dude, I actually don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening, that's when you want to go back to this map and lean on this process of being able to just pause and make sense of things. Like be explicit about what is it that's stumping you right now? What's it that's not actually making sense to you? So that's that cue monitoring. That's principle 2. And if you use that throughout the process of building your AI projects, you'll be able to call yourself out a lot more. So it's this mental question that you ask yourself. On a scale of 3, how hard are things right now? Is it low, medium, or high? And that's that mental question. You want to be monitoring that cognitive load that's going on. And based on your level of cognitive load, you want to change the way that you're approaching things. So that's where it is right now in terms of how to actually approach the project. And this helps us move into principle 3. Principle 3 is recursiveness. And this is where we actually start taking this nonlinear map that we've created on Miro, and we start prompting, opening up a Google Doc and opening up our AI apps like Claude. And the point of recursiveness means that we actually go back and forth between that nonlinear map, the prompt, the linear document, the app, etc. And every time I learn something new, I want to put that onto my map. Every time my map changes, it might change my prompt. And that's that loop of where learning actually happens. For most people, they just spend time only on that AI part or just, vibing, right? So the process is come back, update the map, update the prompt, and go back and forth. So here you go. This is practically me having the AI open, and on the left-hand side, we've got our board open. And again, this is that combination of me making sure that I've got both open. I've got my thinking on one side and I've got AR on the other side. And there's just a rule that I've made for myself that's been quite useful. I always want to have 2 slides open. If I notice that I'm doing this, like if it's full screen, it probably means that I'm spending too much time on AI, unless I need to actually see the app that it's being built. But if I don't have this side open, this nonlinear format, that means that I'm probably falling into too much vibing. But let's build this out together. What we're going to do is we're going to actually just go back and forth. And this is where I start making these nonlinear thoughts into linear thoughts. And this also touches on our 4th principle, which is to make sure that you're doing higher order prompting. What I call, it's just a very simple rule. Essentially, you don't want to fall into lazy prompting, where you're just telling it to build everything for you. And the way that you can engage in that process of high order prompting is by making sure that you've done that nonlinear process, you've monitored your cognitive load, and that you've mapped out how things need to go. And during this process, if you need to do research after you've mapped everything out, you can, but I'm feeling quite confident about building something out. So there's a few things here. What I'm probably going to start off with is I might start off with just building out a basic form and a basic structure of the form. So it's just educators. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to build this integration yet. I just want to build a form. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about, let's just build like a form using a simple app. I'm just thinking about probably just like a 1-page Next.js app, right? And on the form, I just want to start off with a few pages and questions. And eventually we can start integrating those parts together in terms of like getting everything here. So here's that higher order prompt. It just means I'm thinking a bit deeper, right? So, hey, I'm working on a multi-step project, and I might even speak into it. It would be a lot easier if I just speak into it, where I need to actually take some time to build out an evaluation pipeline for instructors. But this is not going to be too complicated. Essentially, we need to build a form together where I am making sure that I create this form and an educator can go through the form, use the prompts in the form, and do a reflection on their performance during the class. There's going to be a few domains that we need to talk about and a few parts in the class that we need to talk about. There's going to be a structure that I want to follow. There's going to be a few dimensions. So obviously there's content authoring that we need to do in this process. But what I'd like for you to do is I just want you to create a simple form just using like just like Next.js, just a really, really simple form. And let's just create the general structure of it. Let's not worry too much about the content of it yet. I can work on that a bit more. But the first step is to just create this form where I can kind of enter my name, my classroom details, and the date of the class, right? And just keep a placeholder for the recording, and then create a few pages that have like static content on them about like, just basic questions. And then towards the end, there needs to be a part where I can like create an experiment. So create a form where I can enter basic details about the classroom, and then I'm thinking about a reflection section where I'm asked a bunch of questions. Once I've done the reflection, I can then do experimentation on it. Actually, maybe like an abstraction layer there as well. And then I can do an experimentation layer. And at the end of the experimentation layer, I should be able to save those, like the experiment just shows on the form and the form ends. So let's create that, just that simple structure, and create like a nice UI, create a nice front end. And yeah, we'll go back and forth and work on this together. So let me just press that and let me see what it does. Just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. This app is called Whisperflow, so it's nice to be able to actually just type it out instead of speak it out instead of typing it out. So we'll let it do its thing, and we'll resume the video once it's created the initial scaffold. Okay, so we've gotten to a part where it's done a lot of stuff. To be honest, my cognitive load is feeling very low because I actually haven't done a lot of thinking yet. But let's just run it. Are you able to run it? Let's just run it through. Let's just see where it is right now. I just want to see the output. but you can see there's like a black box right now. There's been this input that has been done. So let me just open this up. So there's been an input that I made, and there's been a ton of stuff that Cursor just did. It's a black box at the moment. And now it's like, okay, well, my cognitive load is very low. So I'm doing that Q monitoring. And it's like, yeah, I probably need to pause and take the time to understand it. But let's just go through what it's created. So I can kind of just go, here we go, put my name here. Maybe it could just be like a class that I've done. The class could be for maybe 2 days ago. Yeah, there we go. So content clarity, pacing and structure. All right, so that's the review that it does. What even is this place? What? It just gives like a. I could probably remove those two sections, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, but that's the actual process. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I guess it's built something, and yeah, my cognitive load is very low. So I haven't done a lot of thinking yet. So now I can decide to do one of two things. Number one, I can either decide to unlock the black box, which means that, again, all of this is a black box for me. I did none of this. Obviously, AI did all of this. So I can either decide to do that, or number two, I can decide to ignore the black box. I can be like, I don't really need to know this. I can just move forward with investing more effort and attention into making a form that is more that's more reflective of my expertise as an educator and someone who's familiar with learning science, and make sure that the form is actually technically accurate. So you can see there's two learning pathways I can take, and I can decide to do both. I can decide to either upskill on everything that's happened here so far and learn stuff from a technical perspective to make sure that I kind of know what's going on, or I can decide to just focus on the content of this and making sure that the form is really well done. I can decide to do both. So that's the reason we asked that question, which is why it's useful to do this Q monitoring, because now you can get an awareness of what's there, what isn't there, what's a black box and what isn't. And if this is something that I want to learn about, I can just tell it, hey, you just did a ton of stuff that I have no idea about. Like, I didn't have to do any thinking at all. And it's basically a black box for me. Everything you did, I have no idea what you did. So I just need you to spend the time to teach me stuff as if I was 10-year-old, and do like an in-depth kind of teaching, like just, document as to how you built out everything. Because I have no idea what just happened. I might actually prompt it with that, right? And this is where a little bit more of those learning principles might come in. So let me just put that here. And it's creating a markdown file as to how it was built. And again, this goes back to your learning needs as well. If you actually need to learn this, then you learn it. And if you don't, I would still actually argue you should get an understanding of it. So let's take a look here as to how this was built. And I might just put this up onto a Google Doc or a document here. Here we go. So just start a document. Here we go. So here we go. So now we've got a bunch of keywords. And now, to be honest, this is actually something that I would want to commit to and learn a little bit about more, because it's likely that, again, I have some knowledge about this, but it's likely that I'm going to need to know a little bit of this to be able to have conversations with people who are more technical. So again, I'm not technical, but eventually when I do speak to a dev team, I would want to be able to understand some of this. And this is where I'd actually apply certain learning strategies that I've talked about in other videos that I'll put onto the actual screen. And this is where I'd actually want to engage in a deeper learning process where I get out my canvas again. I might actually go back to the mirror, or I might use some paper, and I might apply a priming process to make sure I kind of know what's going on. And I might want to collect the keywords here and map things out, as I have demonstrated in other videos of learning how to learn. And this is how you can use AI to make sure that you're not just vibing, but you're also learning about what's going on here. And is this a black box that I want to unlock? Yeah, I would actually want to unlock this black box because there are certain concepts being talked about here. There's a structure going on here as well that I want to have some awareness about, because then when I chat to more technical people who are going to be responsible for actually bringing this to life, at least I will have some understanding of what they say and what they recommend and what I do here, etc. So I literally would actually decide to learn this. And most of the time, what I recommend is when you are doing your vibing, if you're already familiar with what's going on, that's good. If you aren't, then you should spend the time to unlock the black box ever so slightly. So that's something that I might do and commit to and learn through. So I've demonstrated the process that I would use to actually learn in other videos, and I won't do that now. And that's just to get a theoretical understanding of how things are here. A black box that I don't want to unlock is actually learning how to procedurally program, because I find that to actually be quite redundant. And obviously with the developers that I work with in my team as well, and other professionals that I've spoken to, the actual procedural act of like writing code is just going to be taken over by AI and has already been replaced by AI. But that thinking that goes behind what to use, what technology to use, that could be something that I could learn. Another prompt that I might do is, okay, so you've built it a certain way. Are there any other ways of building this app right now that you didn't do? Are you able to offer those alternatives and create another document for me? So I'm not only learning about what AI has done for me, but I'm also learning about what AI has not done, because that's going to be a black box. Like, I don't know what else, how else could this be built? Could this be built through like a Python app, Python-based app? Are there any other structures that could have been used here as well? So alternative ways of building this here, and I might actually just copy paste that down here as well. Here we go. So URLs, no framework, no Next.js. There's different low code forms. Yeah, there we go. Right, some other recommendations here. And again, if I've been brought into a team to build a project using AI, I would actually want to understand some of this, because there are certain decisions that are being made to how certain applications need to be used and how certain applications don't need to be used. And this is all still a black box for me. So I'm getting this process of, queue monitoring, using that as an understanding as to whether or not the cognitive load is high, medium, or low, and trying to prompt the AI in a way in which I'm getting more of an understanding from a declarative perspective, from a theoretical perspective, behind the decisions that it's made. And I'll document that. And I will learn the declarative parts of this, and I will map it out. But I will not bother learning how to set up through a coding perspective, because that's a black box that I don't want to unlock and that I don't need to unlock. Now, the thing that I see a lot of people do is they don't do this learning at all. So this like process that we've just done right now, where I've kind of just asked it and I've admitted it, there's a black box here. That's what a lot of people are skipping. They're just going back to this app and they're iterating back on the app. But then there's no awareness on that app. There's no understanding of how it was built. There is very limited conversation that you can have about the decisions behind it. And again, it does go back to your goals. It does go back to whether or not you need to unlock the black box. But if you want to develop meaningful expertise and you want to be able to increase your chances of developing better apps and better prompts, if you know something about the decisions that it's making and the content of it, I mean, that already puts you in a better position than people that don't, that are just full vibing, low cognitive load, just doing it all. So when I commit to this process of learning, I'm going to, again, do that non-linearity, apply my learning strategies, as I've covered in other videos, and I should notice that my cognitive load is going up a little bit more, right? And that's that process of making sure that we embrace that non-linearity, the cognitive load. And once I've done that a little bit more, I then might go back to that app and I might just do more prompting on it if I feel like I've learned about things. So obviously the next steps for me here would be to then understand, well, how can I actually make these more accurate? Potentially, not only do I need to do a map on how I need to use the information and the coding part of it, but maybe there's a little bit of upskilling that I need to do as an educator from a pedagogical techniques perspective. So this is actually talking about other stuff as well. So if I just go back to the canvas here, there might need to be a little bit of learning that I do on the actual technological aspect of it, the tech stack, which I'm not going to do too much deep learning on, but maybe I've just realized that there's a knowledge gap in terms of pedagogical techniques here as well. So this is now beyond what the AI can do. And this is, as an expert, I've been brought in to make this decision as to the actual content that needs to be integrated here as well. So this might be me practically actually, again, committing to another process of non-linearity, doing a timer and deciding what questions do I actually want in the reflection. Like, you know, what content do I want to include here? And this is where I'd increase that specificity. This then finally leads into the last principle, which is the quickest principle to talk about, which is the aspect of hypercorrection. What I eventually want to do with this app is I want to get to a point where I have high confidence, and I want to basically weaponize what we call the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you don't know the Dunning-Kruger effect, essentially what it says is that when you're working on a new skill or you're developing new knowledge, at the earlier parts of your skills development or knowledge acquisition, you feel the most confident because you go from zero and you go from having some knowledge and you feel extremely confident. And this is where you are like highest confidence, you know you've mastered it, etc. And the phenomena of vibe coding, or how people are building AI, it is just tons of Dunning-Kruger, right? And once upon a time, you would be humbled, and even with high confidence and, you know, just actually like an illusion of mastery, you wouldn't really be able to do anything. But we are moving into an economy and, you know, a world where people who are not very, very technical, who also are very early on that Dunning-Kruger, you know, graph, they are actually producing output that is relatively meaningful, right? That is actually happening. So what we want to do is we need to embrace the fact that there's going to be like some level of Dunning-Kruger that occurs. Like, I built this and I might bring it to the team and be like, oh wow, like look at this. I know what I'm doing. I built this out. But the reason we want to engage in what we call the hypercorrective effect is because that actually allows us to continue and further building something that is meaningful. So to define the hypercorrective effect, it just means that when you make an error, high confidence errors are corrected a lot more potently compared to low confidence errors. So what that means is if you make a decision and you are like very, very confident about it and you got it wrong, that learning that you would get from it being wrong is more than the learning that you get from making a low confidence decision and, you know, getting it wrong. So you want to get to a point in this project, and this is what I would do practically, where I'd actually continue doing this project. I'd go back from prompting it, I'd go back to learning, I'd go back to prompting, I'd go back to learning, go back and forth. Again, we're embracing that recursiveness, right? We're not just spending too much time on the app itself. We've also got this non-linear document open. We've got our notes open as well. And I'm going to get the project and this form to a point where I've got like this high confidence Dunning-Kruger on this new thing that I'm learning here. Here we go. This document from Cursor, and just learning a little bit more about this, right? Learning about the aspects here, getting the form to a place. And this is where I actually want to get feedback. This is where if I'm deploying this to real customers, I'm going to speak to real customers. But in this context here, if I'm working with a real team, with real project owners, with real product owners, with people who are going to be actually deploying this tool, or people that are going to be using this tool, the educators themselves, that's when I'd speak to them and get more feedback. And this is the aspect that's missing from a lot of vibe building, just because a lot of people who are doing like vibe coding and AI projects, in my experience, are doing it a lot of solo, and they're even using AI to like predict how a customer would use it. But AI is not your customer. You need to speak to real people that are going to be involved in using this tool. So that's when you would start as a human, again, developing those soft skills of being able to communicate, collect data, do user interviews, and these relate to broader product development related considerations. So that's that hypercorrective effect, where you don't want to just be with an AI and you just get AI to correct you. You actually want to then take this, and you might actually deploy it. You might put it onto a real website where it's a bit easier to link it to other people and ask for feedback, or you might just sit down, share screen, record videos, and get more feedback on this. So eventually, when I get this form into a position where I'm like, oh, I like where it's going, I feel like it's good from a technical perspective, I feel like it's okay from, you know, like a learning expertise perspective, a pedagogical perspective, that's when I would then get this project and put it into real put it in front of real people, and get real feedback. Vibe coding, it can feel like learning, but it isn't. It's actually an illusion. And you want to make sure that you integrate these 5 principles, because it's these 5 principles that make the difference between getting an output and actually building something into your brain and owning the project. Non-linearity, queue monitoring, recursiveness, higher order prompting, and hypercorrection. So, which one are you missing right now? Feel free to drop it in the comments. I'm replying to every single comment.